You're listening to Innovators, the podcast from Harris Search Associates, where we speak with global leaders in education, research, engineering, and the health sciences, and ask them to share lessons learned as they continue to advance the frontiers of innovation and discovery. Today's podcast will be led by Joann Fax, Senior Consultant.
Good afternoon. Today we are joined by Dr. Pelema Morrice. He is Vice Provost for Enrollment Management at the University of Missouri. Our topic today is strategic enrollment management and creating pipelines. So we welcome Dr. Morrice for joining us, and we look forward to an enlightening conversation on this topic.
Great, thank you. Happy to be here and looking forward to the dialogue.
Okay, so let me ask my first question. In recent years, higher ed has developed the term strategic enrollment management, as opposed in the old days when we just called it enrollment management. So can you tell us how strategic enrollment management differs from how it was in the past?
Sure, absolutely. The field has come a very long way in the last 20 years or so. For me, the word strategic is another way of thinking about this. I like to use the word holistic enrollment management as a way to get folks to kind of understand where things have headed. So traditionally, enrollment management has dealt, many years ago exclusively with financial aid, undergraduate admissions, graduate admissions. How do we recruit students, move them through the application process, award them financial aid, and many strategies focused just on those two components. When you think about the progression to strategic enrollment management, essentially what we've done over the years is navigate that up from those two well-defined areas to a much more holistic approach. And so holistic enrollment management encompasses a much broader campus-wide ecosystem of factors and external factors that might influence the enrollment puzzle. Those can go anywhere from thinking about the ways in which the institution is positioned and or branded in your competitive market set. Obviously, then holistically also talks about student retention, degree persistence, degree completion as a way to influence your enrollment puzzle, the types of degree programs that you offer. So really, to me, strategic is more about thinking about the holistic ecosystem, about the entire campus and the community, and how all of those things play a role in enrollment management. And there you see this move to a more strategic approach to enrollment. So
does that way of thinking from a more holistic point of view guide you in dealing with other departments in the university that also weigh in on how you do enrollment management and actually have a visible participation in enrollment management?
It does. The adage is, this role is much more of a conductor and a facilitator than anything else. And individual colleges, department areas, program areas, other divisions, they are very integral in terms of the outcomes, overall enrollment outcomes, and they are very good partners in this work. And so interfacing with those different constituents on campus, making sure that they are moving in the particular direction is very, very helpful for all of our enrollment outcomes. And so there is much more engagement now than I think 20, 30 years ago. I spend just as much time with the deans of the colleges and schools than I do with my admissions director, per se.
Wow. And so have you seen any visible differences in how you approach enrollment management now that benefit the students better?
I think the holistic, this goes back to the holistic concept. I think by being able to navigate with other campus partners so that they can see the interconnectivity between all of our work and the impact that it has on enrollment outcomes, I think essentially what you've done is given each department area in college and school a bird's eye view of their role in the process, which, in my opinion, then allows them to understand how integral they are, which allows them to then see much more viability in them engaging with and producing good outcomes in their own areas, which tangibly will have a positive impact on students.
Very good. At a major research-intensive university such as the University of Missouri, where do the pipelines of students begin, and how are the pipelines maintained?
Sure. Well, we are a land-grant institution and a very large one, and those pipelines for us are tied all the way back into our youth development programs across the state. We have a very large and extensive extension and engagement office on our campus that facilitates lots of great work in all of our counties throughout the state. And that work begins then. So our extension offices work closely with 4-H programs. Our extension offices work deep in those communities. And so those pipelines begin as early as 4th, 5th, 6th grade, all the way up through the traditional first year high school recruitment cycle. But for us, because we are a public institution, a land-grant institution, those pipelines, if you will, go all the way back to our pre-K through 5th grade youth development programming.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to change the subject a little bit. I'm not sure what the current student population there is, the ratio of students first time in college to the older students at the University of Missouri, but the typical American college student today is a woman in her 30s. We have more females than males with a full-time job. She's working, she's attending full-time, living on campus, and working less than 20 hours per week. And that makes up about 11 to 13% of all enrollments. As you look ahead, I say 5 to 10 years, 10 to 20, however far you want to look into the future, what will the American college student population be and look like for most universities and colleges? And what will be the challenges that you think you'll face in the future in recruiting and retaining these students? And will we see any difference? Or
Sure. Yeah, I think essentially what I think is we'll see more of the same. So the profile that you talked about there is a growing trend. I think, and essentially what you're talking about is a student who's essentially a part-time student, a student who is working full-time and paying their way through their degree program on their own. And that makes up a good chunk of our overall enrollment, 11 to 13%, as you said, nationally. I think what you'll see is that percentage move up even more. I think 10 years out, that'll be 20+% of the student population will be students who are not coming in as traditional first-year students at 18, students who are coming in and out of academia between 18 to 35, and they're doing so on a part-time basis. So I think it's more of the same. I just think the percentages will continue to increase, and I think we'll continue to see more growth in that part-time student enrollment moving forward.
what do you think is the cause for the change in how students enter universities these days? Is it the cost? Is it just delay? Is it a burden on families? Just what's causing the change in the university student?
Yeah, I think it's connected to three things. I think one, absolutely the cost, and either the cost or the perception of the cost. Because in some states, there are some post-secondary environments that are actually still very, very affordable, but still the perception is that the cost is incredibly high, and that the return on that investment won't be as fruitful as it was in the past. So I think one, there's some return on investment issues. I think there's also, there's a lot more comfort with people these days in terms of having a nonlinear path. In other words, there used to be some scorn around not going to school at 18 and being a traditional freshman. I think those boundaries have changed a lot. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think there's a lot of openness to the fact that people are going to come in out of college many different ways. And I think culturally, I think it's more accepted than it was previously, that you can get a college degree beyond the age of 22. And you can get a college degree by not being a first-time freshman living in a dorm and living on a campus. I also think that the complexity of our higher ed system We are a country that does not have a national higher ed system. It's very much state and regional and context specific. And the comfort level in different communities with navigating that is so varied that I think we're going to continue to see lots and lots more people, again, find alternate pathways. I think the internet obviously has also, the new economy, if you will, has also provided some complexity around, you don't need a college degree to have a viable income. There are many different ways in which to earn money through the new digital economy. And I think that adds another layer of complexity. You've got, obviously, we have well-known cases like folks, Mr. Zuckerberg, who obviously dropped out of Harvard to start a company. But we also have lots of smaller sample size cases where we've got people who have started a business online, are making $40,000 to $70,000 a year, and don't have a college degree, but they know how to code and they know how to navigate the web in a significant way. And so there's a lot of different layers to this, but I think those are some of the ones that come to mind.
I was going to ask this question a little later, but I think I'm going to ask it now. Many companies now are bringing in new employees. They're training them in technology and other skills on the job, but they're also offering them opportunity to go to community college and earn an associate degree. So how would, if that trend continues, like you said, everybody doesn't need a college education initially to make a decent living, so they're finding other avenues. So how would the University of Missouri ever go after that population, say once they got their associates, to try and wean them in and help them get a bachelor's or a master's degree later on?
Sure, that's a great question, and I will answer it and go back to the last question a little. And that just because there are avenues and ways in which you can earn a living now without the traditional four-year baccalaureate degree, it's still the wisest investment that one can make because of the turbulence of the digital economy, which can go in any direction at any point in time. And that they're having that insurance, if you will, of a baccalaureate degree and being able to pivot into different industries, different markets, go back to graduate school, get further training. It's still a very, very wise investment. But I think one thing that we can do and we will do here at the University of Missouri is really partner with those community colleges to make sure that we are providing pathways for students to complete their baccalaureate degree, should they ever want to take a different path in life. You can go through and learn how to code, get training online, get a job on your own, maybe do a community college work, but who's to say one doesn't wake up at 30 and decide they want to be a patent lawyer? There's still no way to do that without a law degree in this country. And so having that baccalaureate degree, letting students complete their baccalaureate degree from alternate pathways is really important for us. We do that now here at the University of Missouri. You can complete your baccalaureate degree online if you have an associate's degree at the University of Missouri. So we have those pathways now, but we're looking at ways in which we can expand those moving forward.
For several decades, for-profit colleges' role in American higher education was significant. Most recently, that sector has decreased in terms of enrollments. Has the diminished role left some students unserved? And should for-profit institutions play a larger role, a lesser role, or are you all picking up some of the students that were originally in for-profit and now coming to more traditional universities?
That's a great question. I'm going to answer it in a roundabout way because I think casting for-profit institutions under one umbrella, I think can get a little dicey because there are a lot of institutions that are allegedly nonprofit that operate in a for-profit fashion. So I'm going to answer it a little differently and say I think there were some institutions that were purely profit-driven. And those institutions obviously have failed, and rightfully so. And I think in terms of students being unserved by those closures for those purely profit-driven institutions, I think those students are still getting served, and I think they're getting served in environments that are much more conducive to allowing them to complete a degree or a pathway to a degree from an institution that actually cares deeply about their success and not about their ability to drive up profits. And so I think those students are being served, and I think they're being served well. And I think since I'm not talking about for-profit, I'm talking about purely profit-driven institutions. I don't think that there is a role in higher ed for purely profit-driven institutions, and I think that the market has corrected itself in that way.
Very good, and thank you for clarifying my question, because you answered it the way I wanted it to be. So,
no problem.
Okay, my last question for you today is: you've attended and worked at a diversity of institutions, Stanford and Universities of Michigan, and now University of Missouri. And you're now enrolled as well at MIT in an executive MBA program. What, from your perspective as someone directly involved in enrollment, are the important differences among these divergent types as it has pertained and currently pertains to your duties and responsibilities?
Sure. That's a great question. I think I've been lucky, not intentionally, to have been worked and attended many different institutional types. The biggest takeaway for me is while all those institutional types have the same broad overarching mission to educate students, we can all drill down and agree that all those places do that. They educate different students for different reasons and for different outcomes. And I think that changes the dynamics of our work here. For instance, at Stanford, when I worked there in financial aid, Stanford is working with a very high achieving student population, one that is in the top 5% in the world in terms of educational attainment. At that point, you're talking about the roles and responsibilities on our end is to make sure that they have the time, the resources to focus on honing and refining a skill set that they've already maximized at a high level. When you talk about a place like Missouri, or even my time at Nebraska, Nebraska Omaha, which was an urban public campus, our role was much more around degree completion, facilitating degree completion, lowering debt levels, making sure students had viable pathways to access and graduate from the institution. And so there's significant variance and difference in terms of this role as it pertains to the institutional type. The only real common thread between all of those is that in the end, we are trying to educate students and improve their learning and their capacity to navigate the world. But beyond that, the difference of those institutions really does significantly alter the roles and responsibilities in this seat. At a place like Stanford, while I wasn't in admissions at Stanford, I was in admissions at Bryn Mawr College. A place like Bryn Mawr, we are making very intentional decisions, around a group of students who all have similar GPAs, have similar track records academically, are all incredibly sound, and we're trying to shape the composition of a class of students who are all likely to graduate and all likely to be successful. Obviously, at a place like Nebraska Omaha, we're trying to educate as many students as we possibly can and help them navigate a career path and an educational path where they all are not as likely to succeed as one would hope. And so the mission and roles are very, very different.
So I'm going to ask finally, are there any words of wisdom you'd like to leave with us about enrollment management? Maybe one or two key points for someone who is interested in this arena to help them either enter enrollment management or participate or view it differently. Do you have a couple thoughts that you'd like to share?
Sure. I think the way in which I've approached the work, which thus far has been successful, is to really think about the role and the position and the field as one where if you're in this seat, you own nothing, but you're responsible for everything. And so really conducting and leading in a collaborative fashion moving forward is incredibly important. It's difficult to be successful without that collaborative approach, and that none of the content really is under your purview, but obviously the outcomes dictate your success. And so being a good partner, being highly collaborative, making sure that you're really orchestrating as much around the ecosystem as you possibly can. That's where you can get good outcomes, and that's the key nugget of the work. But collaboration is the buzzword, and it is a buzzword for a reason. You cannot be successful in this role without being a collaborative partner at the table.
Thank you for those words of wisdom. Today, we'd like to thank Dr. Pelema Morrice, our Vice Provost for Enrollment Management at the University of Missouri, for joining us. A very interesting conversation. Our student lives are changing, and it's nice to hear how our universities are changing with the things that are necessary for students to be successful. So we thank you for joining us today, and we wish you much success in your role there at the University of Missouri, as well as the program, the Executive MBA program at MIT. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you for listening to Innovators, a production of Harris Search Associates. We'll have more insightful conversations with global thought leaders to follow.